Looking for a place to play? If you sign up on Patreon, you'll get access to our webcam league on Discord. All patrons are qualified to enter, and there are cool prizes involved. Sign up to Patreon and start playing. You can also support us by purchasing a TCG player through our Decklists in the description. We love TCG Player because it gives the best prices online and still supports our local game stores. Finally, if you are looking for playmats and t-shirts, check out our store on playingwithpowermtg.com. We add new merchandise all the time, so be sure to check back frequently. Thanks for watching. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Playing with Power MTG, where we play with the most powerful cards in the most powerful formats. Back in February, we brought the Spike Feeders down to the PWP studio to jam games with us. We all had a great time, and tonight's match is one of those games. The ability to bring down the Spike Feeders was made possible by our patrons. Your support gives us the ability to have guests on the show and accommodate them appropriately while they join us for games for you all to enjoy. If you want to become a patron, there are a lot of perks. You'll get early access to videos, exclusive videos, get to play in our webcam league for prizes, and even meet up with us when we have our quarterly Patreon in-person celebration, where we all get together and play and record games together, pending quarantine of course. Thank you all again for your support. Now, let's start out by showcasing our fighters this evening. First, in the Playing with Power corner, we have Ryan piloting Kykar, Wind's Fury. This version of Kykar uses Underworld Breach in conjunction with other cards to storm off for the win. Ryan's opening hand contains an Azorius Signet, Exotic Orchard, Ancient Tomb, Swan Song, Mana Vault, Gitaxian Probe, and Steam Vents. Next, in the Playing with Power corner, we have FOLGER piloting Rashmi, Eternity's Crafter. This deck, called Rashmi Control, is a control deck that seeks to control the board state while leveraging Rashmi's ability for additional card draw. FOLGER's opening hand contains a Botanical Sanctum, Mystic Remora, Yavimaya Coast, Forbidden Orchard, Hinterland Harbor, Exotic Orchard, and a Fellwar Stone. After that, in the Spike Feeders corner, we have Jim, piloting the 3-color pairing of Tymna the Weaver and Silas Wren, Seeker Adept. This deck, called Bears and Cars, is a stacks deck using Hate Bears to slow down the board while using them to pilot vehicles to attack opponents. Jim's opening hand contains a Tundra, Swamp, Thalia Heretic Cathar, Hushwing Griff, Painseer, Mana Crypt, and Weatherlight. Finally, in the Spike Feeders corner, we have Bill piloting Korvold, fae-cursed King. This deck, called Food Chain Korvold, seeks to resolve Food Chain and cast from exile creatures to gain infinite creature mana and win the game with Korvold. Bill's opening hand contains a Tainted Pact, Sylvan Library, Llanowar Elves, Guy's Cradle, Mana Confluence, Forest, and a Nurturing Peatland. Without further ado, let's kick off this demented demonstration of deviant domination. Ryan wins the Spicy Dino Nugget Challenge and gets to start us off. Ryan starts off by paying 2 life and casting Gitaxian Probe, targeting FOLGER. He looks at FOLGER's hand and draws a card. He plays a Steam Vents, into play untapped, paying 2 life. Ryan passes. FOLGER plays a Botanical Sanctum for turn. He casts a Carpet of Flowers. He moves to his second main phase and adds 1 blue from his carpet. He casts a Mystic Remora. In response, Ryan casts Swan Song, countering the Remora and giving FOLGER a 2/2 bird. Bummed out about losing Remora, FOLGER passes. Jim plays a Tundra for turn. He casts an amazing turn 1 play, Serra Ascendant. He follows up with a Mana Crypt and gives the turn to Bill. Bill plays a Forest for turn. He casts a Llanowar Elves. Bill passes. Ryan plays an Ancient Tomb for turn. He casts a Lion's Eye Diamond, which is a critical piece of his combo, so everyone takes note. He taps his Ancient Tomb to cast Azorius Signet. Ryan ends his turn. In his first main phase, FOLGER adds a red from his carpet. He plays an Exotic Orchard for turn. He casts a Fellwar Stone. He passes. Jim plays a Swamp for turn. He moves to combat and attacks Bill with his Serra Ascendant. Bill takes the hit and Jim gains 6 life. In his second main phase, Jim casts Weatherlight. He passes it around since not many have seen this card at a CEDH table. It resolves and Jim passes the turn. Bill plays a Mana Confluence for turn. He casts a Sylvan Library. Bill ships the turn to Ryan. Ryan plays an Exotic Orchard for turn. He taps his Ancient Tomb to cast his commander, Kykar, Wind's Fury. He casts a Mana Vault, triggering Kykar and creating a 1/1 spirit. Ryan passes. In his main phase, FOLGER adds 1 blue from his carpet. He casts his commander, Rashmi, Eternity's Crafter. He plays a Hinterland Harbor for turn. FOLGER passes. Jim plays a Scalding Tarn for turn. He cracks it for an Underground Sea. He casts Thalia, Heretic Cathar. He then casts Painseer. He crews the Weatherlight, which is an awesome sentence to say, with Thalia and Painseer. He moves to combat and attacks Bill with the Weatherlight and Folger with Sarah Ascenda. Both take the hit, Jim gains 6, and he looks at the top 5 through the Weatherlight trigger. He reveals Helm of the Host and puts it into his hand. All through, Jim passes. During his draw step, Bill draws an additional 2 through Sylvan Library. He pays no life and puts 2 back on top. He plays a Prismatic Vista for turn. He casts Burgeoning. All through, Bill ends his turn. Ryan untaps, draws a card, and passes the turn. During his main phase, Folger adds 2 green from his carpet. He casts Compost. Rashmi triggers, and Folger reveals a Verdant Catacombs, putting it into his hand. He plays a Forbidden Orchard for turn. Bill's Burgeoning triggers, and he puts a Nurturing Peatland onto the battlefield. Folger casts Ponder. He looks at the top 3, rearranges, and draws a card. Folger passes the turn. When Jim untaps, Painseer triggers, and Jim reveals an Ancient Tomb during his upkeep and puts it into his hand. Jim plays his Ancient Tomb for turn. Bill's Burgeoning triggers, and he puts a Strip Mine onto the battlefield. Jim crews the Weatherlight with Thalia and Painseer. Jim attacks Bill with the Weatherlight and Folger with Sarah Ascendant. Both declare no blocks, Jim gains 6, and Weatherlight triggers, with Jim revealing a Phyrexian Revoker and putting it into his hand. In his second main phase, Jim taps his Ancient Tomb to cast Phyrexian Revoker. Revoker enters, and Jim names Kykar. All through, Jim passes. At the end of Jim's turn, Bill taps his Mana Confluence to cast Tainted Pact. He exiles cards from the top of his library until he reveals a Collector Oof and puts it into his hand. Tainted Pact resolves, and Folger's Compost triggers, and Folger draws a card. During his draw step, Bill draws 2 extra cards through Sylvan Library. He pays no life and puts 2 back on top. He casts Carpet of Flowers. He moves to his second main and adds 2 black through his carpet. He taps his Mana Confluence and his Peatland to cast his commander, Korvold, fae-cursed King. In response, Jim flashes in Hushwing Griff, preventing Korvold's ETB trigger. Hushwing resolves, then Korvold resolves. Bill cracks his Prismatic Vista, triggering Korvold, drawing a card, and putting a +1/+1 counter onto it. He fetches up a snow-covered forest. He casts Collector Oof. He then plays a Gaia's Cradle for turn and passes to Ryan. Ryan plays a Scalding Tarn for turn. He taps his Ancient Tomb to cast Narset, Parter of Veils. Kykar triggers, and Ryan creates a 1/1 Spirit. He activates Narset, looking at the top 4 and revealing a Wheel of Fortune. All through, Ryan gives the turn to Folger. In his first main phase, Folger adds 2 blue from his carpet. He casts a Grafdigger's Cage. Rashmi triggers, and Folger reveals a Noxious Revival into his hand. He plays a Verdant Catacombs for turn. Folger passes. When Jim untaps, Painseer triggers. Jim reveals an Inventor's Fair and puts it into his hand. Also in his upkeep, he loses his Mana Crypt trigger and takes 3 damage. He plays an Inventor's Fair for turn. He moves to combat and attacks Ryan's Narset with Thalia and Sarah Ascendant. Jim gains 6, and Narset dies. In his second main phase, Jim casts his commander, Silas Wren, Seeker Adept. Jim ends his turn. During his draw step, Bill draws 2 extra through Sylvan Library. He pays 8 life to keep them both. He plays a Field of the Dead for turn. Field of the Dead triggers, and Bill creates a 2/2 zombie. He taps his Peatland to cast Squandered Resources. In response, Folger casts Mana Drain, targeting Squandered Resources. Rashmi triggers, and Folger reveals a Mental Misstep and puts it into his hand. With that, Mana Drain resolves, Squandered Resources is countered, Folger's Compost triggers, and Folger draws a card. Bill sacrifices his Strip Mine, targeting Folger's Exotic Orchard. Korvold triggers, getting a +1/+1 counter, and Bill draws a card. Bill casts Exploration. He plays a Scalding Tarn for turn. Field of the Dead triggers, and Bill creates a 2/2 zombie. Bill taps his Mana Confluence to cast Dockside Extortionist. Extortionist resolves, but Bill doesn't create treasures due to Hushwing Grift. All through, Bill passes. Ryan starts off his turn by cracking his Scalding Tarn for an island. He taps his Ancient Tomb to cast Wheel of Fortune. Kykar triggers, and Ryan creates a 1/1 Spirit. Then everyone discards their hand and draws 7. Ryan plays a Volcanic Island for turn. Bill's Burgeoning triggers, and he puts a swamp onto the battlefield. Then Bill's Field of the Dead triggers, and he creates a 2/2 zombie. With nothing else to do, Ryan passes the turn. In his main phase, Folger adds 3 green through his carpet and 2 colorless through his Mana Drain. He casts a Cursed Totem. Rashmi triggers, and Folger reveals a Scalding Tarn into his hand. He casts a Mana Vault. He casts a Talisman of Curiosity. He plays an island for turn. Bill's Burgeoning triggers, and he puts a Bloodstained Mire onto the battlefield. Bill's Field of the Dead triggers, and he creates a 2/2 zombie. All through, Folger gives a turn to Jim. During his upkeep, Jim loses his Mana Crypt trigger and takes 3 damage. He plays a Command Tower for turn. He taps his Ancient Tomb to cast Dark Confidant. With the remaining colorless floating, he casts a Mana Ball. He attacks Folger with Sarah Ascendant and Bill with Silas Wren. Both take the hit and Jim gains 6 life. Jim passes the turn. During his draw step, Bill draws 2 extra through Sylvan Library. He pays no life and puts 2 back on top. He casts Survival of the Fittest. He cracks his Bloodstained Mire, triggering Korvold, getting a counter, and drawing a card. He fetches up a snow-covered swamp. Field of the Dead triggers, and he creates a 2/2 zombie. He cracks his Scalding Tarn. Korvold triggers, Bill draws, Korvold gets a counter, he fetches up a Taiga, Field of the Dead triggers, and he creates a 2/2 zombie. He activates Survival of the Fittest, discarding Bloom Tender and fetching up a Mayhem Devil into his hand. He taps his Mana Confluence to cast Mayhem Devil. In response, Jim casts Mana Drain, countering the Devil. Folger's Compost triggers, and he draws a card. Bill casts Vampiric Tutor. He fetches up a card onto the top of his library and loses 2 life. Folger's Compost triggers again, and he draws a card. Bill cracks his Nurturing Peatland, triggering Korvold, drawing and getting a counter, then drawing through the peatland. He casts Food Chain. With no responses, Food Chain resolves. He activates Survival of the Fittest, discarding Elves of Deep Shadow, and fetches up Squee the Immortal. He exiles 2 zombies to Food Chain to make 2 red. He uses this mana to help cast Squee. He then demonstrates a loop of casting and exiling Squee to generate infinite creature mana. This is when he remembers Hushwing Gryff is on the battlefield, so he knows he cannot go infinite with his commander. So instead, Bill casts Lotus Cobra. He casts a Temur Sabertooth. He moves to combat, attacking Jim with Korvold and Folger with 4 zombies. Korvold triggers, Bill sacks Exploration, drawing a card and giving Korvold another counter. Folger blocks a zombie with Rashmi, and he and Jim take the rest. All through, Bill gives a turn to Ryan. Ryan plays an island for turn. He taps his Ancient Tomb to cast Arcane Signet. Kykar triggers, and he creates a 1/1 spirit. He casts a Talisman of Progress, triggering Kykar again and creating another spirit. He attacks Bill with Kykar and 3 spirits. Bill takes the hit, and Ryan ends his turn. At the end of Ryan's turn, Folger cracks his Verdant Catacombs for a forest. Folger then casts Factor Fiction. Rashmi triggers, and Folger reveals a Mana Crypt into his hand. Then Factor Fiction resolves, Folger targets Jim, and he reveals a Chain of Vapor, Chrome Mox, Brainstorm, Gemstone Caverns, and a Command Tower. Jim separates them into 2 piles, and Folger chooses the first pile. Then Folger moves to his turn. Folger starts off his turn by moving to combat and attacking Bill with his 2/2 bird, killing him. In his second main, Folger adds 4 blue through his carpet. He casts a Mana Crypt. Rashmi triggers, and he reveals a Vidalcan Shackles into his hand. He casts Vidalcan Shackles. He plays a Flooded Strand for turn. All through, Folger passes. At the end of Folger's turn, Jim crews the Weatherlight with Thalia and Painseer. When Jim untaps, his Painseer triggers. In his upkeep, he reveals a Polluted Delta off of Painseer. He reveals a Vampiric Tutor off of Dark Confidant. Still in his upkeep, he casts Vampiric Tutor. He fetches up a card onto the top of his library and loses 2 life. Folger's Compost triggers, and Folger draws a card. Jim plays a Polluted Delta for turn. He casts Elesh Norn, Grand Cenobite. Elesh Norn resolves and devastates Ryan's board. Jim crews the Weatherlight with Painseer, now a 3/3 due to Elesh Norn. He cracks his Polluted Delta for a Scrubland. He casts his other commander, Tymna the Weaver. He moves to combat, attacking Folger with the Weatherlight, Hushwing Gryff and Sarah Ascendant, and Ryan with Thalia, Silas Wren, Phyrexian Revoker, and Dark Confidant. In response, Folger casts Force of Vigor, exiling Dryad Arbor, targeting Jim's Weatherlight and Ryan's Lion's Eye Diamond. Rashmi triggers, and Folger reveals an island into his hand. Weatherlight and LED are destroyed, and then Folger casts Chain of Vapor, targeting Jim's Sarah Ascendant. Ascendant bounces, and Jim sacks a land, copying the spell, bouncing his own Mana Vault. He sacks a land again, this time bouncing his own Mana Crypt, and he stops there. Folger and Ryan both take the hit. In his second main phase, Jim targets Weatherlight in his graveyard with Silas Wren. He casts a Mana Vault. He casts a Mana Crypt. He casts Talisman of Progress. He taps his Talisman to cast Sarah Ascendant. All through, Jim passes. Ryan untaps, draws for turn, looks at Elesh Norn, and decides to pass. At the end of Ryan's turn, Folger casts Impulse. Rashmi triggers, and Folger reveals a Nature's Claim into his hand. Then Impulse resolves, Folger looks at the top 4, keeping 1 and bottoming the rest. Also in the instep, Folger casts Nexus of Fate. It resolves, Folger gets an extra turn, and he shuffles Nexus back into his library. During his upkeep, Folger pays 4 to untap his Mana Vault. In his main phase, he adds 4 blue through his carpet. He cracks his flooded strand for an island. He plays an island for turn. Folger then casts Enter the Infinite. Rashmi triggers, revealing a windswept heath into his hand. In response, Ryan casts Mana Drain, targeting Enter the Infinite. In response, Folger exiles a blue card and casts Misdirection, targeting Mana Drain to Misdirection itself. In response, Ryan casts Force of Negation, targeting Misdirection. Misdirection is countered and exiled, and Mana Drain counters Enter the Infinite. Dismayed at losing his awesome play, Folger moves to his next turn. During his upkeep, Folger loses his Mana Crypt trigger and takes 3 damage. During his draw step, he takes a damage from his Mana Vault. He casts a Chrome Mox. Rashmi triggers, and Folger reveals a Dispel into his hand. Chrome Mox resolves, and Folger doesn't imprint anything, mostly just wanting the Rashmi trigger. With nothing else, Folger passes the turn. During his untap, Jim's Painseer triggers. During his upkeep, he reveals City of Brass through Dark Confidant. He reveals Sea of Clouds through his Painseer. He loses his Mana Crypt trigger and takes 3 damage. In his main phase, he plays a Sea of Clouds for turn. He moves to combat and attacks Folger with Elshnorn, Sarah Ascendant, Thalia, and Tymna, and attacks Ryan with Hushring Gryff, Silas Wren, Painseer, Dark Confidant, and Phyrexian Revoker. In response to attackers, Folger activates Vidalcan Shackles, gaining control of Ryan's Kykar. Folger then casts Nature's Claim, targeting his own Mana Crypt. Kykar triggers, Folger creates a 1/1 spirit, which immediately dies to Elshnorn. Rashmi triggers, and Folger reveals a Sensei's Divining Top into his hand. Then Nature's Claim resolves, Mana Crypt is destroyed, and Folger gains 4 life. Folger blocks Sarah Ascendant with Kykar, and Thalia with Rashmi, and takes the rest. Jim gains 8 life, and Ryan dies. In his second main phase, Jim cracks his Inventor's Fair for an Ethersworn Canonist. He casts Ethersworn Canonist. In response, Folger casts Force of Will, countering the spell. Jim then casts Tocatli Honor Guard, and passes the turn. During his draw step, Folger takes the damage from his Mana Vault. In his main phase, he adds 2 blue from his carpet. He casts Sensei's Divining Top. He activates Top, looking at the top 3 and rearranging. He taps his Top, drawing a card and putting Top on top of his library. He plays a Forest for turn. He casts Pull from Tomorrow, where X equals 4. He draws 4 and discards a Misty Rainforest. He recasts Sensei's Top. He flips his top and draws a card again, digging for an answer. With no other outs and staring down Jim's board, Folger concedes the game. Ladies and gentlemen, what a cool game that was. It was neat to see some of the interesting builds at the table that we aren't used to seeing on the channel. Each person had some really cool stuff, and there was a lot of good back and forth. Congrats to Jim on his win. No combos or infinites to be seen, but instead good old-fashioned stacks and attacks is what won him this game. His deck is very synergistic, and it was really cool to see it in action. Bill's Korvold deck was doing a whole lot, and he would have won had it not been for the Hushwing Gryff. In the end, inevitability caught him, and he folded to the rest of the table. Ryan was set back from the stacked pieces on the board. The Grafdigger's Cage completely hosed his win con, and he had to try and find a way out of it. Unfortunately, he did not get there before the game was over for him. Folger's deck was very cool and doing a lot of cool stuff. Seeing Enter the Infinite was a really wild ride. Overall, while he had control over the board, Jim's advantage got the better of him. The player of the game was Folger. His table policing and big plays definitely made him the biggest impact on this game. His advantage through Rashmi made sure that he had his hand full and ready to answer threats as they came. The most valuable card was a little harder this game. We considered Rashmi for the advantage it kept bringing Folger with the spells he was casting. We also considered Field of the Dead giving Bill zombie after zombie. In the end, the most valuable card goes to Painseer. Having the ability to get a Dark Confidant effect and the ability to pilot vehicles made this card such a great addition to Jim's board state. We wanted to thank the Spike Feeders again for coming down and playing games with us. Please check out their channel listed in the description below. If you are not already a subscriber, consider subscribing. They have all kinds of great content. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. Tune in next time when we duke it out to see who will be king of the competitive EDH table. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.